I'd been a night shift nurse at Greenview Psychiatric for 5 years. The quiet hours were my solace, a time when the world slowed down and the hospital's whispers felt almost comforting. But that changed when the ominous notes started appearing. One Monday night, as I began my shift, I opened my locker to find a small folded note resting atop my fresh scrubs. Frowning, I picked it up and unfolded it. "Be careful around room 609. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. I glanced around the empty locker room, expecting to see a colleague stifling a laugh, but I was alone, shrugging it off as a harmless prank. I tucked the note into my pocket and went about my duties. Room 609 housed our newest patient, a John Doe admitted earlier that day. His paperwork was sparse, with no details about his admission, except that he'd been transferred from another facility. He was in his early 50s, with graying hair and a demeanor that was unsettlingly calm. During my rounds, I hesitated outside room 609. The door was slightly ajar, and the dim light from the hallway cast a sliver of illumination into the otherwise dark room. Peering inside, I saw him sitting in the corner, hands resting on his knees, staring blankly at the wall. "Good evening," I said softly, stepping just inside the doorway. "I'm Nurse Lisa. How are you feeling tonight?" He slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were a piercing blue, sharp and cold. There was a long, thin scar running along the inside of his left forearm, just visible beneath the rolled-up sleeve of his hospital gown. Noticing my gaze, he pulled his sleeve down, covering the mark. "I'm fine," he replied, his voice steady but devoid of emotion. "Do you need anything? Water, perhaps?" He shook his head slowly. "No, thank you." An uncomfortable silence settled between us. "Well, if you need anything, just press the call button," I said, stepping back into the hallway. As I continued my rounds, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling his presence stirred in me. But patients came from all walks of life, many with troubled pasts. It wasn't my place to judge. The next night, my apprehension grew. There was another note, this time taped to the inside of my locker door. "Trust your instincts." My hands trembled. This was no prank. Someone was trying to warn me. But who? And about what? I decided to show the notes to Mark, a fellow nurse and close friend who also worked the night shift. "That's odd," he said, examining the notes. "Do you think someone's messing with you?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's starting to freak me out." "Maybe it's about that new patient, John Doe," Mark suggested. "He's a bit off, isn't he?" I nodded. "There's something about him. He seems harmless, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more beneath the surface." "Just be cautious," Mark advised, "and if you get any more of these, maybe report it to security." I agreed, though a part of me wondered if I was overreacting. That night, during my break around 2 a.m., I sat alone in the staff lounge, flipping through channels on the small television. The news caught my attention. Police are still searching for the suspect in a violent home invasion that occurred last month in Millhaven, the reporter announced. The perpetrator is described as a male in his 50s, approximately 6 feet tall, with graying hair and a distinctive scar on his left forearm. My heart stopped. I leaned forward. Millhaven was a city 200 miles away. No one here would have connected the dots, except maybe one person. I thought of the notes. Someone knew. Returning to the nurse's station, I found a third note placed atop my patient charts. "He isn't who you think he is." My hands trembled as I read the words. I needed answers. The following night, a farewell party was organized for Dr. Thompson, a beloved psychiatrist retiring after 30 years. A large greeting card was circulated among the staff for signatures and well wishes. As I added my message, I flipped through the pages, smiling at the heartfelt notes from colleagues. Then, a familiar handwriting caught my eye. Wishing you all the best in your next chapter. Mrs. Walters. I stared at the letters. It was the same neat handwriting from the anonymous notes. Mrs. Walters was our night shift janitor, a quiet woman in her 70s who moved through the halls almost unnoticed. She'd been with the hospital longer than anyone else, often sharing stories of the facility's history during brief chats. I sought her out that evening, finding her in the supply closet restocking cleaning supplies. "Mrs. Walters, can I speak with you for a moment?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned, her kind eyes meeting mine. "Of course, dear. What is it?" I handed her the notes. "These, did you write them?" She glanced at the papers, a flicker of hesitation crossing her features before she sighed softly. "I was hoping you'd figure it out." "Why didn't you come to me directly?" I asked. "I didn't want to cause alarm," she replied, "but I needed someone to know." "Know what?" I pressed. "Who is he?" She leaned against the shelf, her expression weary. "His name is Michael Harris. Years ago, in Millhaven, there was a violent home invasion. The victim was my nephew. He fought back and managed to injure the intruder, a deep cut on his left forearm. The man was never caught, but my nephew never forgot that scar." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "And you recognized the scar on John Doe?" She nodded. "I did. When I saw him admitted here, I knew it was the same man. I couldn't stay silent. Have you told anyone else?" "No. I was afraid no one would believe me." I took a deep breath. "We need to tell someone. The authorities." "Be careful, Lisa," she warned. "He's dangerous." "I will." That night I met with Mark and shared everything. We agreed to approach the hospital administration in the morning to inform them and contact the police. But when I arrived at the hospital the next evening, I learned that John Doe, Michael Harris, had vanished. He was transferred to another facility, Janice, the head nurse, told me. "Which one?" I asked, alarmed. She frowned, flipping through his file. "There's no record. That's strange." Panic surged through me. "We need to notify the police." "I'll look into it," she assured me. "But I'm sure it's just a clerical error." Feeling uneasy, I went through my shift in a haze. As dawn approached, I headed out to the parking lot, the sky tinged with the first light of morning. As I reached my car, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. My heart raced as I unfolded it. "You should have left it alone." The handwriting was different, slanted, aggressive. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I whipped around, but only saw the empty expanse of the lot. He knew. Heart pounding, I jumped into my car, locking the doors. My hand shook as I gripped the steering wheel, eyes darting to the rear view mirror, driving home. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, lurking somewhere just out of sight. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, and every distant sound made me jump. Days turned into weeks, and Michael Harris remained at large. Every shadow outside my window, every unexpected noise, kept me on edge. I knew I would never feel truly safe again, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to return.